Welcome to Star Potential, a podcast where we explore the meaning of our existence while having a few laughs and sometimes tears through stories from the road of life. I'm your host, Julie Jo Hughes. As a stage performer, my life is quite literally about song and dance. I believe that life here on Earth is a playground for discovery, not a contest to be won. We ask questions together like, how do I evolve my consciousness? And how do you sing a passionate ballad when there's an old guy in the front row with his balls showing? True story. Stick around for these fun conversations. Welcome back to Star Potential. I'm Julie Jo, your host. Today we're going to talk a little bit about when Julie Jo became a grown-up. A lot of the things that we'll be going through here and the stories that we'll go through together, it's not just to tell you my life story. It's actually that when we start really doing the inner work, when we start really examining ourselves from the inside out, taking into account our patterns and our past and how did we end up in this shape and form that we're in currently, it helps a lot to have a fuller scope of the full perspective. Where did we come from? What kinds of things do we believe just because it's what we've always believed? Have we ever really questioned those things? Those are a lot of the topics that we're going to discuss over and over here at Star Potential. And so this is a discovery that I literally just had like a week ago. And as I was processing some of these things, I had such a big revelation that I never realized that's where this issue that I've kind of discovered that I have came from. This could be known as talk therapy, self-therapy, shadow work. This is known as integration of other selves. It can be known by many names depending on kind of what type of a guide you're working with to go through your self-work. But ultimately, this work that we're all doing is integrating these parts of ourselves that need to be acknowledged and accepted with love. So today, we're going to take you back to Julie Jo growing up on a farm outside of a small town in rural Iowa. I was in my senior year of high school and applying for colleges, primarily in Chicago, because this was my life vision at 17 or 18 years old. I was going to go out in the world and pursue improv work and possibly stand-up comedy because my ultimate goal was to be a regular on Saturday Night Live. So ultimately, I knew I was going to live in New York City, and this was going to be my dream. I had grown up watching Saturday Night Live with my parents and not understanding half the jokes until much later, but still thinking it was funny. And this was a tradition all throughout my childhood. I loved having the laughs together with my parents, and I just loved entertaining people and making people laugh. I spent all 4 years of my high school life being one of the cheerleaders. I would write these skits and I would write these songs. I would take popular songs and I would rewrite the lyrics kind of Weird Al Yankovic style. I would change them to have something to do with our football team or our basketball team or our wrestlers. And I would put their personal names into the lyrics and I would make these either inspiring songs or funny songs. And then I would write these skits based on pop culture. There were skits based on Friends. There was this one funny story where our cheerleading sponsor, who also happened to be my elementary teacher and also my cousin. So she knew me quite well. And we're getting ready to put on the pep rally. The pep rally's already started and somebody is out there speaking. And we had decided we were going to do some kind of a spin on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And she's explaining it to me. And I said, okay, so what do I do for this game show? And she said, well, you're going to have them come up and then you're going to ask them questions and they have to pick A, B, or C, or D, like on the show. And she's handing me the microphone. I'm walking out in front of the student body and all the teachers and the community. And as she's handing the microphone to me and I'm walking out, I said, oh, I've never actually seen the show. And her eyes got as big as dinner plates. And I just winged it. And it was so much fun. But that was who I was at that point in time. I loved the thrill of live skits, figuring out stuff as we go and making people laugh based on not even really pop culture. I loved things that had to do with people that we knew and kind of poking good fun at people, kind of roasting people in a way. I also had this great teacher that for 1 hour of the day, it was part of our gifted and talented program, which in Iowa we call TAG. There's some version of it wherever you are, in the United States at least. But during this 1 hour of the day, what it meant for our teacher is that he wanted you to explore your area of interest. And so I told him, well, my area of interest is Saturday Night Live. And so he said, okay, great. Well, how are you going to use this 1 hour every day to explore how to get yourself on Saturday Night Live? And so I spent a lot of time like writing to different actors, asking for advice. And I did get some letters back, actually. I discovered a lot about the audition process for SNL. How did talent scouts go out and find people? And that's why I decided, I guess I'm going to have to go into stand-up because that's how a lot of people get invited to come audition for SNL. And as I was looking into all this teacher granted me permission to once a week, I think it was Friday mornings, I had a 20-minute time slot and I would do comedy routines for the whole class. It usually meant I was doing impersonations of our teachers. And I'll never forget the day that I decided to impersonate our principal, and which I loved my principal, but she was pretty strict, and she had like a stern demeanor, which is, a great quality for a principal. And he invited her to come and watch, unbeknownst to me. And so I'm in the middle of this impersonation of my principal, and she shows up at the door, and I just froze. I think I picked up eventually, but it was definitely tainted the rest of the thing because I didn't know how she would react to this. She took it very well, by the way. I loved my principal, and she and I have many great stories together. But I'm giving you this background to say that's where I was as a senior in high school. That was definitely my life's vision. So throughout your senior year, you're applying to colleges of wherever you want to go. Halfway through that year, I had kind of determined that I wanted to make sure I didn't immediately move to one of the coasts and turn around and come home because I ran out of money or because it was just too big of a switch for me or something. So I decided I wanted to start in Chicago. It was still an 8-hour drive to come back home if I needed to come back home for a weekend or whatever. So technically within driving distance. And they had great schools in Chicago, and they have the second city. And my plan, because first of all, I didn't even want to go to college. I really thought it was pointless for somebody who wanted to be an actor and a stand-up comic and all these things to have a degree. Like, what's the point? And my dad felt really strongly that, you're smart and you're super capable and there's no reason why you shouldn't have a degree because you might not want to do what you do forever. To which I said, yes, I do. But he thought it was a really good idea for me to have a degree. And so my kind of compromise was, fine, I'll get a useless degree in theater. And yes, my degree has never gotten me a job. Now, going to college was not useless for me. Fast forward to say I had many great life experiences in college. But nonetheless, it's not like my degree has ever gotten me any kind of job in my career. But anyway, great contacts, great experiences, but it wasn't in direct relation to the piece of paper that I hold. But I digress. I had applied to several schools in Chicago because that was the plan. I was going to take classes and get a degree in theater, but all the while be taking classes at the second city. And I knew that many SNL alums had come from the second city. And so I wanted to train with the masters there. And I wanted to hobnob with alumni from the second city and then move to New York where I could get on SNL. And that was my plan. So I applied to all of these Chicago schools. Upon the advice of my favorite high school teacher, he had suggested strongly that I should at least apply to one in-state school. And the main reason why you do this, if you're not from the United States or you're not familiar, is because in-state tuition, you get a break from out-of-state tuition. And that's mainly because your parents have been paying taxes to the educational system for years. And so these universities, if you go to a state university in your state, then you get a much reduced tuition than if you're coming from out of state. And so that's a big reason why you would want to consider going to a university in your state. But as I said, I was in Iowa. I wanted to go to Chicago because that's where the Second City was. And if you're not familiar, the Second City is an improv troupe and school. They have classes all to do with improv. And so that's what the Second City is, okay? So, as part of my plan, I had all of these Chicago schools I had applied to. And then I said, fine, I'll apply to one Iowa school. And it was this favorite teacher of mine. It was his alma mater, the University of Iowa. So I did visit the University of Iowa. I did love their theater program, but I was just planning to go to Chicago. So my parents and I took this weekend where we went to Chicago for the weekend to kind of boop, 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 stop at all these different schools that I had applied to. This was, I think, in like January or something of my senior year. I don't actually remember what time of year it was. That's irrelevant. The point is that my applications were still in process. Like I had sent all of the kind of preliminary information, but I was still lacking a few pieces here and there of whatever they required for the application process. Maybe I needed some letters of recommendation or certain extra things that they still needed to complete my application. But I had applied at all of these schools. So I went to visit all of these very prestigious schools in Chicago. Now, based on my scores throughout high school and everything, I was used to, kind of rising to the top, being kind of cream of the crop. But also, it was never important to me to be the best. Now, we could examine that. There were many reasons to that, but I didn't want to be known as like the smart kid. I wanted to be known as the fun kid. Like I wanted to be the person that people wanted to hang out with more than I cared about getting the highest score on the test. I could get the highest score on the test, but that wasn't. In fact, sometimes I would find that I would purposely even almost pretend with others like, I know that test was so hard, just because I would rather choose belonging to the group in that moment than the authenticity of that actually wasn't hard for me at all. That stuff came really easily for me. So that's kind of where I was in high school. And my scores and my grades and things reflected that because sometimes I got in trouble for talking because I already knew everything they were teaching about. And so I was talking to a friend or something. Well, you get marked down for that. I'll never forget the semester that I came home and the only B I had was in chorus of all things. And I was kind of known as like the star singer of the school. This was something I was known for. And so I remember my parents being like, Julie, this is a little bit ridiculous if you're going to have, the only B on your report card is going to be in this area where you naturally shine. Like, shut your mouth, But again, this is who I was at this point in time. I knew what my values were. I knew what was important to me. I didn't care about being top of the class. I cared about my friends and having fun with people and just kind of like living it up, I couldn't wait to go to college and start building my career as an actor. So when I visited these schools, it was all about the vibe for me. I've always been an intuitive person, long before I had any idea what that word really meant. But I get a feeling when I go someplace from the people, from the walls themselves. Like I pick up on these subtleties of energy and things. And the first 3 schools that we visited they just didn't feel like me. I was like, nope. This place feels too academic. This feels too stuffy. This feels too serious or whatever, because I wanted my college experience to be about fun because, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't really see the point in the degree anyway. It was more about the experience for me. But when I visited Northwestern, I loved the color. I loved the mascot. I was going to be a purple wildcat, and their theater program was so much fun. I got to sit in on a couple classes, and I remember my dad turning to me at one point. We were sitting in on this acting class, and these kids were kind of roaming around the room. They were embodying different inanimate objects. And the teacher at one point had said to them, "Be the alarm clock. Be the alarm clock." And this kid was really working to embody the qualities of the alarm clock. And my dad leans over and whispers to me, "You want me to pay 50 grand a year so you can be the alarm clock?" But anyway, I fell in love with Northwestern. Just everything about it, I felt at home there. And so for me, that was it. It was decided I was going to Northwestern. When we got home from Chicago, I called the other 3 or 4, I can't remember now. I called all the other schools. I withdrew my application. And as I had mentioned, my application was already done. There were just like these supplemental pieces that I just hadn't turned in yet because I wanted to go visit the school first. And it was like I wanted to decide which one had the honor of having me at their school. I never once considered it the other way around, that it would be them deciding if I was worthy enough for their school. Like, of course I was worthy enough for their school. I had never considered any other possibility. And you might see where this story is going. Senior year goes on. I had kept my application at the University of Iowa like I promised my teacher I would. Then one day my letter arrived from Northwestern University, and it felt kind of thin. I was like, finally, they're sending me my acceptance letter so I can go ahead and officially order all my purple wardrobe. And I ripped open the letter and saw the words that I never expected. "Thank you so much for your application. Blah, blah, blah. You're rejected." I didn't stop crying for probably the next 5 days. And looking back, I think this was really the first big rejection I had ever felt, received at this point in my life. So I'm 18. I've got my whole plan mapped out. It's still a plan based completely on chance and faith, but it's my plan. And suddenly it was all shattered. With my rejection letter from Northwestern, suddenly I wasn't moving to Chicago anymore. I didn't apply to any other schools. I withdrew my application from all of them because it didn't feel right. So I ended up going to University of Iowa, which was a 4-hour drive from home. I got my degree in theater. I did not take classes at the Second City because there is no Second City in Iowa City. I took advantage of many other things. I had lots of great experiences at University of Iowa. So this is not a boo-hoo sob story. But what it is that I had never really realized before until literally like a week ago that I think this is when the first big notch came out of my perceived worthiness. Up to this point in my 18 years, I had truly believed that who I was and the way that I presented myself in the world was enough. And that was me. And that I was basically accepted, more or less, by being who I am. Little side story here. As I was applying to these schools, and some of these schools I was applying to, I remember my guidance counselor at the time saying, "Ooh, these are pretty good schools, you know?" And I kind of defiantly looked back at him like, "Yeah, well, I'm a pretty good student, so what's the problem?" And we were in Iowa, so we didn't take the SATs unless you were applying to certain schools on the coasts. But most of the schools I was applying to, you just needed an ACT score. So if you're unfamiliar with that term, this is a college entrance exam that you have to score a certain number or higher. And whatever the minimum, like whatever the kind of average was for these schools that I was applying to, the score that I received on my ACT was much higher. It was, like way above where it needed to be. And so again, it never crossed my mind that I wouldn't be accepted where I wanted to go. We were a small school. I was a very outgoing kid, and I had, for the past 3 years already at that point, been the head or president of many of the organizations in the school. I was the president of FCCLA, which was Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America, or something like that. Future, I don't know. I was the head of the cheerleading squad. I was the head of choir. I was the head of band. I played the saxophone, by the way. one of the key leaders in our speech and drama program, a leader in many areas. And so to me, I had lots of volunteer experience. I thought, all the good things to put on the paper. There were a few things that there were some classes that you were supposed to take and I didn't take based on principle. Are you seeing a theme here? I thought that the person teaching a certain class in our school, I didn't think that they were as competent to teach that thing. And so I didn't want to take that class. And my guidance counselor would be like, well, you really need this class to get into college. And I was like, nope, they'll take me the way I am without that one class because I think it's going to be a waste of my time. And I would rather learn that at college when somebody can really teach me that well. And all of my other scores and everything will make up for it. I really had this belief of something outside of the systemic way that things in our society work. I really believed that these schools I wanted to go to would look at me in a holistic way. I thought they would look at me, the person, and see that I was going to be such an asset to their university. And again, it was up to me to decide if I wanted to go there or not. And so when my scores came back, my guidance counselor said to me, wow, Julie Joe. And I said, what is it? And he said, I never knew you were smart. Those were my guidance counselor's words to me. And I blankly stared back at him, trying to figure out how to respond to this backhanded compliment, and said, why? And he said, well, you know. And I said, no, I guess I don't. Tell me. And he said, well, you know, you're just so... And he did this gesture where he held his hands up and he bounced his ears from one shoulder to the other and kind of giggled. That was my guidance counselor, folks. And so I just kind of decided at that point, yeah, I think we're done here. I'll go ahead and guide myself from here on out. But thanks. It's been real. Peace. So back to the rejection letter. I just never saw it coming. And the story gets even more interesting from here. I really could not accept it at any level. And I had this deep belief that there was some kind of a mistake. I was almost trying to convince my parents, like, we need to drive out there in person. I think there's been some kind of a mistake. There was something overlooked here. They got one digit wrong. This must be human error. Something happened. There's no, like, why would they not want me? I don't understand. I was just convinced that there had to be some kind of a mix-up. And like a week after this, I get this email that was like, congratulations, fall, whatever they called us, probably Wildcats or something. And I was like, what? And it was all this information about when orientation was going to be and all this stuff. And I'm like, what does this mean? Like, so they did mess up. And I was going through all this turmoil. I got it during the school day. And about an hour or hour and a half later, I got another email. Oops, our mistake. If you received an email from us earlier today, please disregard. We're sorry for any inconvenience this may have caused. And I was just cursing the universe, like, why are you playing with me like this? I don't understand. Like, are you trying to tell me that I should just go there anyway? Like, what are you trying to tell me? And years later, I could never quite accept I half expected somebody to call me at some point and be like, oops, our bad. Would you like to come now? To which I would be like, no, I don't even need your school, but I would like the validation, please. Thank you. Looking back all these years later, it definitely was a formative kind of core memory for me. This meant I did not go to Chicago. I did not pass go. I did not collect $200. I did not take classes at the Second City. And now what actually happened is very interesting, but the high school boyfriend that I had at the time, it also made it much easier for us to stay together. that also wasn't really part of my initial plan. As we had kind of started dating halfway through my senior year, I was pretty clear up front what my life plans were and that we could enjoy this time together. But when the fall came, I was moving to Chicago and I was starting my lifelong career as an actress, and that would probably be it for us. So when everything changed. And it was kind of like, well, yeah, I guess we could probably just see where this goes now. That would change a whole bunch of things. That relationship, we did stay together through my 4 years of college. We got married that summer after I graduated from college. I got my first performing job the summer after college. We moved to our first place that was a little farther away from home that next year. I started my professional performing career that year. And a year and a half later, that marriage also ended in divorce. So, wham, wham, I'm hitting you with all kinds of things in this episode. The thing is, sometimes when we're so attached to a certain outcome and then it seemingly gets ripped out from underneath us, then sometimes I think we make decisions without really waiting for our 2 feet to come back to the ground. And I don't tell this story because I have any kind of regrets about any part of my journey whatsoever. I fully believe that every step in my path has helped shape me into the person I am today. And I learned lessons from each of those things. But ultimately, that relationship and that first marriage did not truly align with who I was and where I was going and what I wanted. But there was some part of me that thought, well, I didn't think I could have both, but maybe I can. And I think that we'll talk more about that in a future episode because there is much more about that part of the journey, which obviously affected me for years and years afterwards. But after being rejected from my college of choice, changing my whole life plan, and then marrying my first husband because we were so in love and we were really convinced that that was all we really needed was love. And it was okay if we wanted different things out of life, that we would work it out. And ultimately, it didn't. Then I felt like a complete failure. Not only had my visions for my own life, not only had I been wrong about those, but I had now messed up someone else's life too. And that's really how I saw it for a long time. And so when I kind of trace back these issues that I have dealt with as far as my self-worth and seeking my validation in external things, wasn't expecting to feel this so deeply. For the majority of my 30s, I found myself coming up against the same issues of self-sabotage because ultimately, deep down, I didn't believe that I truly deserved happiness, that I truly deserved success. And even though on the surface level, I would say that I deserved it because I was such a hard worker and I was doing all the right things, it didn't matter what I did externally because internally there was this deeply held belief that I was flawed and that I wasn't good enough, that I hurt people, that I don't know myself well enough. I stood in my own way for a long, long time. I think I could trace it back to this rejection letter from the college I was so convinced would be so thrilled to have me. So what I want to help you with today is I want you to examine some of your patterns. You can do this by beginning to sit in silence. You can do this by some journaling. I have lots of tools that I would like to share with you that I've used along my journey to help me kind of process through some of these things. But ultimately, no matter what we're striving for externally is irrelevant if we have these kind of broken pieces on the inside. And you could look at my life from the outside and say, and I would agree with you. I have a wonderful life. I've had so many amazing experiences, and I'm not a broken person, but there was this belief on the inside that I was. And so it doesn't really matter whatever was happening with me on the outside, because if I couldn't heal and accept and love these pieces of me on the inside that wanted to scream out and be heard, that they felt too small, they felt unworthy, they felt unlovable, until I could begin to integrate those pieces, then there was no chance for true fulfillment, for true happiness. And for years and years and years afterwards, I would keep seeking for various things outwardly and externally that I thought, if I can just achieve this thing, then it proves that I am worthy. If I can just climb to the top of this company, then it proves that I am a hard worker and that people should be glad to have me on their team. If I can get to this big of a stage, it shows that I am a really good performer and that I should be getting paid more. There were all of these ways, all of these external examples that I could give you of how I continually sought the fulfillment of these broken pieces inside me by things outside. And ultimately am learning and walking my walk right now. And that's what I want to help you with, is to understand that you don't stand a chance of healing those things in your external world if you are not willing to go inside and to work on those things in your internal world. You have to be willing to look at them straight in the eyes first and say, I see you. I know that for some reason you feel unworthy. Why is that? And the minute we begin to shed light on something in the dark, it loses its power over us. It's like when you're a little kid and you're convinced there's a monster under your bed. Your dad comes in and he shines the flashlight underneath the bed and shows you there's nothing there. And then maybe you even realize, oh, it was my stuffy that was creating shadows and I thought that was a monster. Now that we shine the flashlight and I can see what's going on, it's funny to me. I can't believe I was so scared of that monster that doesn't exist. It was real in my mind. And that's what you'll often find when you're digging inside, is that this stuff that you believe, it's not even real. You've concocted it in your mind to try to make sense of things that happen to you, but it's not reality. And so if we can shine the flashlight of truth into some of these mistaken beliefs inside of us, we begin to take back our sovereignty. We begin to take back our own sense of control. And that's what I want to help you with. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope that this helps you maybe examine some pieces of your own journey and helps you realize that we all have stuff. We all have stuff that we got to work through. It's okay sometimes to just take some time and heal those childhood wounds and traumas that have caused these limiting beliefs that we don't even realize that we're carrying around with us into adulthood. So, how do we begin to recognize those patterns? How do we begin to shed light into the dark and see what may or may not be hiding there? Well, it's easy to spend a lot of time in shadow work, and that's not really the purpose. All we really want to do is to kind of shine the light, see what might be there, and then take the power away from it by seeing that these limiting beliefs that we have are not real. So how do we begin to do that? There are many different ways we can begin to practice mindfulness, but it does require usually breaking some kind of a habit that you already have so that you can make space for a new habit of mindfulness. So this might mean taking time to journal a little bit each day. It might mean carving out time to sit in some silence. And that might start with guided meditation. It doesn't necessarily have to be silence. It can mean having a little bit of instrumental music behind you. It might mean going for a walk in nature. But we do have to introduce these practices of mindfulness in order to take ourselves out of the day-by-day habits and routines so we can begin to see the patterns. It does require a practice of being able to see the patterns and connect the dots. So I invite you today to decide what sort of mindfulness would you be willing to implement for 5-10 minutes a day so that you can begin to take a slightly higher perspective on the patterns in your life, to be able to see limiting beliefs that might be there, that may be inadvertently holding you back. So let me know in the comments or the DMs what you're already doing that you love, that works for you, or what you'd be willing to try to introduce this sort of work into your life. This is the beginning. We're just going to go deeper from here. So I can't wait to see what you're willing to try. And if you are interested in starting a guided meditation practice, I would love to share with you the one that I made for you. I made you a free gift. It's available in the show notes of every episode. You can also find it by going to my Instagram profile, and I've got a link that you can click there. But it's just a 9-minute introductory gratitude meditation. I sing to you as well, and I would love to give this gift to everyone that might be seeking something like that to help them in their journey. So please accept my gift, and I would love to hear how it goes for you as you begin your practice of mindfulness, of gratitude. That's how we begin to change our vibration. That's how we begin to change the pattern. Stick around. We're going to keep having more of these deep inner work stories here on Star Potential. And thank you so much. I see you, and thank you for being here with me. Thank you for tuning into Star Potential with Julie Jo Hughes. If this episode resonates with you, please share it with a friend or shout us out on Instagram with the tag @TheJulieJo. That's TheJuliejo. I made you a gift. Please visit us on Instagram to receive my Grounded in Gratitude singing meditation. Want a shot at our monthly giveaway? Please leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts with your email or Instagram handle so we can give you credit. Thank you for your love and support. Until next time, keep shining your light. And that's a wrap.